My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasangran, Guru Piran New, fellow Jnanis. So here today, I would like to continue Mahan's teachings, the second principle on thought, go a little bit more deeper on Mahan's perspective of what this thought is. So I will continue with some of the definitions of what Mahan, how he defines the aspects of thought. And here, as I mentioned in previous satsangs, thought is a measure of our experience. And here, Swamiji says thought is that which pervades every place and at all times. So thought is everywhere, at an instant, even in the moment where you are, in the state of silence, that is also a state of thought. And everything that we do, everything that we cognize, everything that we experience is because of this ability to, the mere fact that we are experiencing itself is a thought. So even that no mind state is also a thought. So it's just a continuum from zero to infinite. So again, Swamiji says that it's in every place and at all times. So what we're seeing here is that thought is like omnipresent, omniscient, and we're starting to see that perspective of how initially when we thought about thoughts, we only think it about as a material experience. But even the absence of any material, person, place, and so on itself is a thought. So again, one sees it from a more wholesome and holistic way. Then he goes on to define what ideas are. And he says that ideas, where do we get our ideas? We actually get our ideas from our bodily sensation, our senses, the mere fact that, think about ideas. What is ideas? Ideas is about, an experience of this material reality. And that takes place only when we have our sensory perception, hearing, seeing, touching, smelling, tasting. So the five senses are very important, and the environment that we are living in. So if you ask this whole question, what is an idea? Idea must be something about a person, a thing, a place, and so on. So you see that everything is got to do with our sensory perceptions and also the environment that we have. Can you have something where we have no idea, which is absence of idea? If it's an absence of idea, then we see that one can say even that is zero idea, which means that the absence of materiality, absence of cognition of this materiality. And you see that great saints and sages think of this in a wholesome way. Very similar to when we say that, nothing, what nothing means is that no thing. No thing, I mean, thing here is matter and energy. So it's an absence of matter and energy. That in itself is a state of, existence. So we are familiar with matter and energy because we associate ourselves with body and sensation and the material world and the environment. But when we bring it down to that sense of zero idea or zero thought, that in itself is an existence. And that is the state of no thing, neither matter nor energy. And that in itself is an existence that transcendental to space and time. That is the no thing state. And so material mind tends to grapple with this because it's always looking for sensory perception to provide that information. But great saints and sages think about this in a much more wholesome way. And the first area that they cognize and think about is actually the deep sleep state. So the deep sleep state is the absence of this material world, absence of body, absence of our material reality. That in itself is an existence that is transcendental to that material. So I exist without the body. So that in itself is a existence, and sometimes this existence is called transcendental or universal existence. So I'll come back to a little bit more on how the logical thinking is to give you a more wholesome and comprehensive understanding of what great saints. And then he goes on to explain knowledge. See, by your actions and by experience of pain and pleasure, you get knowledge. So knowledge is understanding of all the interactions in this material world. And in this material world, of course, we've got space and time. And because we have space and time, we have the ability to, think, act. And then when we have that act, we have that experiences, either sukha or dukkha, either pain or pleasure. And those pain and pleasure are experiences. And those experiences are, the thought of, pain and pleasure then is, registered as memories that stores in our data bank. And the next time we see something or come to, that similar type of experience, we can remember, okay, by this thought and by doing this, by this action, we get this outcomes. So he says that, this is where knowledge comes in. There's a learning that takes place. By doing something, we have an experience, and that experience could be sukha or dukkha, and we remember that. And that remembering is actually the, brain and is able to, transform this electrical pulse into an experience that is stored in our memory. So again, through this, interactions and actions, there is a learning that takes place. And this is what the biological species, by the way, every biological species goes through this learning, from the amoeba to bacteria to viruses to, more complex beings, including the Homo sapiens, which is us. So if you see very clearly that even the viruses have knowledge, you can clearly see in the context of the COVID, where the viruses are mutating and it's learning from their experiences, it's learning from the environment, and it's mutating to become more and more resilient. So everything in this material universe has a learning, the ability to, cognize, the ability to experience, the ability to react to those experiences in the environment, the ability to learn and react, accordingly. So this is part and parcel of acquisition of knowledge. And nature has inbuilt this in every species, that enables them, that knowledge is important for them to sustain themselves in this universe. So we see that, thought is a measure of experience, and, it exists in everything that we do, and action and inaction. And similarly, we see that we get ideas and, a sensory, the measure of, also a piece of information that we get from, our sensory perception. We put it together, and that becomes an important thought that then becomes, knowledge that is registered into our memory banks. And finally, wisdom is essentially what Swamiji calls widened knowledge is wisdom. That means a deep understanding and awareness of an experience or a thought or an idea is actually what he called wisdom. Very deep understanding, awareness, both sukha and dukkha. So this is very important. The wisdom knowledge is, helps us to be aware, helps us to become enlightened. And this makes, what he says, makes one purge the useless in thought. The things that are not relevant, we actually, leave it out, and we develop new ones that are useful. So wisdom is somewhat like the Hamsa, the quality of Hamsa, which is the swan, that it takes what is necessary, that helps it to, expand and deepen the mind and experience. And that is not necessarily, things that are not necessary, leaves it out. So wisdom is this quality of the Paramahamsa, the Hamsa, that essentially the swan, that takes dips its beak into the water and just take the nutrition that is relevant. In that same way, wise people, they don't run away from this material existence. They dip their beak into that material existence and, take that which expands and makes the mind, wider and deeper. And, and they avoid, or they divinize, or they become, enlightened by thoughts that makes the mind shrunken. And this is where, wisdom, knowledge takes one from that state of unillumined to the state of illumination. So again, there's an evolution that takes place, understanding what thoughts are, understanding, ideas, creating ideas, creative ideas, innovation, and knowledge, being able to understand things in very deep, introspective, contemplative, reflective. And in the deep meditation and tapas, one acquires the wisdom knowledge that enriches, enlightens us, and expands our state of understanding of everything, including our own self. So Swamiji goes through this, tries to explore and tries to deeply understand what is happening in our mind and what constitute that mind. So then he goes on to say, what is meant of, what is wisdom and the type of, so there are different levels of understanding of wisdom. There are things that are material things that takes place. We have a good understanding of what is the principles behind our material universe, principles behind, how we react to this material universe. And he says that, look, there are different stages of evolution of wisdom. And he goes on to explain that, for example, a talented musician, artist, or dancer, they are wise. They know their profession really well. Through this deep learning, introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, they not only play other people's tunes, but they're also able to create their own tunes, their own interesting tunes. And this is really important because you see that this introspective, contemplative, reflective, and meditative mind, enables one to move from just borrowing ideas from other people. So, for example, a ordinary musician or artist or dancer will probably copy ideas from other good musicians or artists or dancers. But one who is wise will go through an interesting phase. And that phase is the following, they go through, there's three important phases. One is absorptive. Absorptive means they absorb ideas, insights from other people that are around there, other musicians and other artists and other dancers. And most people leave at that. They become copycats or imitators. And that's what majority are. But there is the next stage, which is much more deeper, is that a much more deeper, trying to understand, learn from others, but also then incorporates that knowledge to adapt to their own lifestyle, adapt to their own circumstances. So you would have seen a music or heard a music, and you adapt that to your own local understanding and your own experience. Similarly, you may have seen a scenery or art, you may modify it, using that to modify. And similarly, a dancer who learns about, say, flamingo, they see flamingo, they modify it flamingo is this dance, I think it's an Argentinian dance, and they adapted it to their own local environment. The beat may be very similar or slightly modified. So we have that first phase of absorptive. We learn from others, and then we adapt it to our own lifestyle. But as we go deeper, we see that then that's another, adaptive is another form of being creative. But again, you have incremental, innovation and creativity. But then if you go deeper, you start becoming innovative. You create your own music, you become develop or draw your own art or poetry or dance, completely different. So there is an evolution that we go through. It depends very much on how deep our knowledge is. So Swamiji explains this state of evolution. Similarly, You see, in all religious or spiritual, people look at other people and copy from them, and they leave it at that. But there are others that are adapted. Okay, this is what Swamiji said, and or Mahan said, or and they would leave it as that. This is what it says. That's it. It's becomes a dogmatic belief. Others will adapt and say, hey, this is what he said. The I God philosophy is his experience. Now I'm putting that into my own life, and I start adapting it, and I get my own experience. And I'll say, okay, some things are consistent, some things are different. Maybe uh, our lifestyles are different. This is adaptive. But then using that, others, use that as a foundation to discover new things, discover new experiences, and document it. That's being innovative. So that continuum of state of evolution gives us much more deeper wisdom knowledge. The same thing is said, for agriculture, an expert in agriculture, or doctor, or warrior, or minister, or including thinkers and prophets and religious preachers. You see, they all go through this evolution. They learn from others, and then they adapt it, and ultimately the good ones will become more and more innovative. And I see that in Mahan too. He started off with uh, absorbing knowledge, and then he adapted to his own circumstances, and then what the guru, his master, taught him, he adapted it, and ultimately he innovated to discover the 3 steps of initiation and the I God philosophy. So this evolution that we go through, and I'll tell you why this is very important, because it's got important meanings of how we see the self and God. So he goes on to say that, ultimately when one attains that, you know, enlightenment, they not only are able to create a better life for themselves, but they discover new ways of reducing and removing the sufferings of other people. So they learn from others, they adapt it, transform their lives, make things better for them, and then discover new ways to make things easier and help others to have a different perspective, better quality of life, and so on. So this is what Swamiji says, the real philosophers or men of wisdom. They not only, learn from others, but they also adapt it and transform their own lives. And ultimately, they transform the lives of others. So again, there are many people that learn from others, gain many things, but they just keep it to themselves, for their own gains. So again, Swamiji says, real people are the ones that use this as a foundation to make that big difference. So again, it's something that you may want to think about. What state are you in? Are you in the learning phase, or are you adapting to your own circumstances, creating new experience for yourself? And ultimately, once you've acquired that awesome inspirational beauty, how do you then pass it on to the different people that come to your life? Sometimes tailor making it for different circumstances and people that you can make a difference. And this is what Swamiji says. There's a beautiful quote that he says that, in Tamil, he says, "Kuraiya nivartika kuriya kurale kadavul." He says, one who is able to remove all obstacles and challenges of others are God incarnate. So again, not only, discovering your own challenges and missteps and mistakes and correcting it and becoming more illumined by it, but also be able to use that experience to illumine other people. So it's a different state of evolution that one goes through. And here, this is where you see that the thoughts that moves from that state of selfishness, me, to a state of selfness, having adapting that wisdom knowledge to transform our own personality and identity in much more, not material, but in a more deeper spiritual understanding who we are, that selfness. And then you become selfless. Selfless is that now that you have full understanding of who you are, you're not this material body, you're not this limitedness, you are the unlimited, you know, the infinite, the infinite potential and possibilities. You have to have that full confidence through your own experience. And there's an evolution that takes place that, they become more and more selfless to be able to permeate this to other people, their family, their friends, their neighbors, the community, a stranger. You see a stranger in the street, say, "Hey, have a great day," or you're buying a cup of coffee. Would you like a cup of coffee? Or if you see the street dogs, you say, "Hey, they're struggling, or why don't I feed the dogs?" Or the gardener that comes to clean your drains, you give him some water and some food, you see. So you become more and more, selfless in what we do. And ultimately, what happens is that your circle of knowledge starts expanding from your own self to your family to the greater community. Ultimately, you realize that self percolates in everything. And this is what the self-realization is, that evolution that Swamiji is talking about. You will experience as you feel a beautiful inner joy that nothing material can give you that reality. So Swamiji then talks about how does one acquire this knowledge? And this quote is very important. He says the sufferings are ancestors of wisdom. What he means here is that, challenges are what makes us learn and relearn, and sometimes unlearn. In challenges, we learn new things. And I give you an example. He says that, you see, we had COVID for the last year and a half. And, a lot of our satsangs were in physical mode, and after satsang, everybody goes. But COVID, although it's restricted us from meeting and traveling but what it has done is that it enables us to, become more creative and more innovative. And today we see that we are communicating not just to people that are close in our center, but open to, we became more creative to look at how do we do digital satsang, how do we become more creative to touch the people that used to come to the center. And through this, enthusiasm and that push to the COVID, the virus is there. It restricted our movement, but it did not restrict our mind to expand and to travel everywhere. And this suffering is what pushed us to become more creative and innovative. And that's what gives us, this wisdom knowledge. So if you see historically, if you see the greatest people, whether it's prophets or spiritual leaders or scientists or philosophers or others, they are, you know, they are, altitude. I mean, their growth or their their stewardship and the leadership and the prominence is on a foundation that has had a lot of hardship that they had to overcome to transform that scars to become stars. Somewhat like the Paramahamsa, they look so gliding beautifully in the water, but they're paddling really hard and fast that nobody sees. And this is where we see that great saints and sages and masters and scientists and philosophers and thinkers. They look so majestic. It looks so easy, but nobody sees them working really, really hard. And that suffering, the challenges really shapes them and transforms them to become who they are. Somewhat like if you see a diamond, right? The original state of a diamond looks like a coal, covered by so much soot, but the knocking and the scraping and the polishing and you see that as that is done, all the soot start dropping off and ultimately the glow starts appearing. And this glow is what gives this prominence that sits in a jewelry shop on a ring or a earring that glows, that gives that value. In that same way, sufferings, the challenges, the polishing, and all this, enables the mind to glow, have that tejas. And this is what Swamiji is saying, that, you know, challenges are essentially to make us more polished, to make us more creative, to make us more innovative, and so on. It also says that, also to acquire the wisdom, one needs to cultivate tolerance, the ability to, say, come what may, I'm going to, not stop this. I'm going to push ahead. There's no excuses. And that patience is really, really important. Sometimes we don't get what we want. It's okay. We learn from it. We recalibrate back and come back and keep trying. And this is where this notion of, that intensity is very important. The intensity will take us away from the distractions. So the tolerance, as Swamiji says, is tolerance is the progeny of wisdom. You see that great saints and sages, great masters have so much tolerance to many things: criticism, poverty, ridicule, many, many things that helps them to deflect things. Somewhat like the lotus tree. If you see the lotus tree, sits majestically in a lake. The lake could be very dirty, but it sits majestically glowing. And something very interesting, it's got leaves. And, if you throw water on that leaf, the water will curl up and drop off. It will not absorb it. And this is what the spiritual mind is. It's got thousands of petals, infinite petals that is reaching out to, the universe. It's got leaves, and the leaves stand out to nourish the plant. Through the process of photosynthesis, it's absorbing that energy, that unarvu from nature to be standing and giving that mind that majestic beauty. It's standing in a water, the lake that may have a lot of debris, but yet it's being nourished by the leaves. And you throw how much water, how much material, experiences on that leaf. The leaf, the water curls, up and drops off. It's not impacted by the water. And this is what a spiritual mind is that it has this beautiful root, that is embedded so deep, in the water, with the leaves nourishing it, and the mind majestically, being one with that universe. And this is what a spiritual human mind is, that wisdom mind is. 1,000 petals that is reaching out to the universe. And this requires, Swamiji says, a pondering research. I mean, this is introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. This is research. And he says that research about ourselves, research about our mind. Why is our mind generating thoughts? How is our mind experiencing and being illumined and being, why does our mind becomes unillumined? Sometimes, how does it get out of that unillumined state? So we really need to understand the processes that is happening within our brain and how our mind essentially recalibrates or does not recalibrate. So this requires research. We do research of many, many things, but the most important research is ourselves. So that pondering research every day in the morning when you sit down and meditate, that in itself is a research. You see, we are in that state of absorption, in the state of awareness, in the state of understanding. And he says that research intensity and experiences are allies to wisdom. Without research, acquiring wisdom knowledge is very difficult. So, so what Swamiji is saying is that to acquire that universal mind, the Paramahamsa type of mind, the mind like the swan, the big eye, one needs to put in that effort. He says that is, sometimes it's challenging. Sometimes it's nicer to sit in front of the TV and watch some shows. The mind doesn't have to think, right? But he says that, when things are easy, we don't learn. So sometimes we have to do challenging things to challenge the mind. Somewhat like our own body, right? So when you carry a lot of weights, you run a lot, up the hill and all those things, we see that our muscles form. right? In that same way, we have mental muscles. When we, the mere fact that gravity is pulling us and we're trying to go against gravity by standing up and running and carrying weights, we see that we start forming muscles. In that same way, the gravity of materiality is pulling us in one direction, and we are pulling in another direction inward. Material world is pulling us outward, and we are now pulling inward through the practice of yoga and meditation. So the tussle enables our mind, like how the body, to build muscles, to build mental muscles, intellectual muscles, and as when we build that, we see that we have a lot more stamina, we have a lot more, mental stamina, intellectual stamina, to be able to, and the bandwidth to be able to, understand, become aware. We become more patient, we become more, enlightened, we become more aware of things, we have a lot more compassion, and we see that enlightenment of all our thoughts and experiences become much more easier. We become more calmer, we become more tolerant, we become more patient, we don't rush and do things. And we see that it's easier for us. The more we do that, the more we can intensify our research, intensify our experiences, and that becomes part of our wisdom knowledge. And this is quite consistent with both the true Dvaitva and Advaitva philosophy. This notion of intensifying our bhakti, intensifying our introspection. In Dvaitva it says when we intensify our bhakti, we acquire jnana, and the jnana helps us to intensify our bhakti further, and that you know two-way feedback essentially ultimately leads us to this wisdom knowledge of the self, the enlightenment. In that same way, we see in the Advaita is also the same way, that the introspective is not on anything physical or rituals, but it's an inner journey that one takes, intensifying. Ultimately, it leads to the self-realization. And for this, we see that not just abstract ideas or something that is far off, but essentially intensifying this to get that experiential knowledge. That's what Swamiji says, Arivin, Arival, Arivin, Telivu. So through this experiential learning, we get Telivu. Telivu is clarity. Telividam, Telivai, Tenda the Jnanam. He says this deeper understanding gives us the jnana, the wisdom. Jnaname unarve. He says that jnana is actually our spiritual vibration, that God force, that God substratum. Unarve ungalin arivu. That he says that is what our intelligence and intellect and our wisdom knowledge is. So, and our understanding of our own existence, the cosmos inside us and the cosmos outside becomes one. So this is what Swamiji's, so he's explaining the process of the human mind and the evolution of the human mind through this introspection, contemplation, reflection, this research, that wisdom knowledge that gives us good understanding of who we are. Sandosham.